My child, stop scrolling and remain here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not placed before you by accident. Something has been unfolding behind the silence, beyond what your eyes could see, and heaven has witnessed every hidden detail. The person connected to your heart did something they never intended for you to discover. They placed your honesty beneath a quiet test. They watched. They waited. They searched for a crack in your words, a contradiction in your actions, or a secret that would confirm the fear they had been carrying. But when the truth finally stood before them, it did not bring the relief they expected. It brought them to tears. Do not turn away now. There is a reason this message has reached you at this exact moment. Your soulmate did not test you because they felt nothing. They tested you because what they feel has become too powerful to ignore. The deeper their heart moved toward you, the more frightened they became of being mistaken. They had known disappointment before. They had trusted words that later proved empty. They had opened doors to people who entered with promises and left with pieces of their confidence. So when your presence began to feel different, when your energy felt strangely familiar, when your kindness continued even when there was nothing for you to gain, something inside them whispered, "This cannot be real." At first, they tried to dismiss the connection. They told themselves that they were imagining the depth of it. They attempted to reduce you to a passing thought, a temporary emotion, a beautiful distraction that would eventually fade. Yet each time they tried to create distance, your memory returned with greater intensity. A simple phrase you had spoken would surface in their mind at night. A small act of sincerity would replay when they were alone. The calm they felt around you would contrast sharply with the confusion they had known around others. And slowly, quietly, they began to realize that the real danger was not that you might deceive them. The real danger was that you might be genuine. Pause here, because this is where the hidden story begins to deepen. Your soulmate was not prepared for genuine love. They desired it, prayed for it, imagined it, and perhaps even claimed they were ready for it, but when something honest appeared, it awakened every unhealed place within them. Real love does not only comfort the heart. It reveals where the heart still trembles. It exposes the walls that were built after betrayal. It shines upon the memories one hoped had been forgotten. Your presence became a mirror, and in that mirror, they saw both the future they wanted and the wounds that told them they would lose it. That is why they began watching the details. They noticed how you spoke when no reward was offered. They remembered whether your actions matched your promises. They paid attention to the way you treated people who could do nothing for you. They listened for changes in your story. They observed how you responded when you were misunderstood, overlooked, or disappointed. Outwardly, they may have seemed calm. They may have acted distant, casual, or even unaffected. But beneath that surface, they were gathering every small piece of evidence, trying to answer one question that had begun to control their thoughts: can I trust this person with the parts of me that have never been safe before? You did not know you were being measured against the shadows of their past. You did not know that ordinary moments carried extraordinary weight. A delayed response became a question. A gentle explanation became evidence. A moment when you could have lied but chose honesty became something they replayed again and again. They were not only listening to your words. They were listening for the absence of deception. And there was one particular moment, one decision you made when you believed no one was watching, that changed everything. Heaven saw it. You were given an opportunity to protect your image by bending the truth. You could have hidden an uncomfortable detail. You could have chosen the easier answer. You could have said what another person wanted to hear and escaped the tension. No one would have blamed you. Perhaps no one would even have discovered it. Yet something within you refused to exchange your peace for temporary approval. You chose honesty, even though honesty made you vulnerable. You spoke with sincerity, even though you did not know how your words would be received. You remained true to yourself when deception would have been simpler. Your soulmate learned about that moment. Not immediately. Not in the way you might imagine. The truth traveled through a path neither of you had planned. A conversation unfolded. A question was asked. Someone mentioned something they had observed. A detail surfaced that your soulmate had been quietly wondering about. At first, they listened with guarded curiosity. They expected to discover something that would justify their hesitation. Their heart had already prepared for disappointment. They thought they would finally find the hidden flaw that explained why the connection felt too good to trust. But instead, they discovered that you had told the truth when lying would have benefited you. They discovered that you had protected someone's dignity without asking for recognition. They discovered that you had refused to speak badly about them, even when you were hurt. They discovered that your silence had not been indifference. It had been restraint. And when those pieces came together, the emotional wall inside them began to collapse. Something is waiting beneath this revelation, so stay close. Their tears were not simple tears of happiness. They cried because the truth about you forced them to confront the truth about themselves. They saw how suspicious they had become. They recognized how fear had taught them to doubt what was pure. They realized that while you were quietly remaining honest, they had been searching for reasons not to believe you. They felt ashamed, not because they wanted to harm you, but because they suddenly understood that their test had been unfair. They had judged your heart using evidence from people who were never like you. They had expected you to repeat betrayals you did not commit. They had watched you through the lens of wounds you did not create. And when they could no longer deny your sincerity, something within them whispered, "What if I have been pushing away the very person I prayed for?" That question broke them. The room around them seemed to disappear. Their breath became unsteady. They looked away, hoping to hide what was rising in their eyes, but the emotion came too quickly. One tear fell, then another. They tried to compose themselves. They may have placed a hand over their face. They may have turned toward a window, lowered their voice, or pretended they were simply tired. But their soul had reached a point where pretending was no longer possible. They were not crying because you had failed. They were crying because you had passed a test you never knew existed. They were crying because your honesty was more beautiful than they expected and more painful than they felt they deserved. They were crying because they suddenly understood how close fear had come to costing them someone rare. My child, you have often wondered whether your integrity mattered. There were moments when telling the truth seemed to bring no reward. There were times when you remained loyal in silence while others misunderstood you. You may have watched dishonest people appear to move ahead while your sincerity went unnoticed. You may have questioned whether anyone would ever recognize the quiet discipline it took to keep your heart clean in a world that often rewards performance. Heaven is telling you now, nothing was wasted. Every time you chose honesty when manipulation could have given you an advantage, your spirit became stronger. Every time you refused to betray your values for temporary comfort, you built something invisible but powerful. Every time you spoke truth gently rather than using truth as a weapon, you demonstrated the kind of love your soulmate had almost stopped believing existed. Your honesty was not merely a personal virtue. It became the key that reached a locked chamber within them. But understand this clearly, the test did not end when they discovered the truth. In that moment, another test began, this time, for them. Would they admit what they had done? Would they confess that they had doubted you? Would they reveal how carefully they had been watching? Would they allow pride to keep them silent, or would they step toward you with humility? This is the part they are wrestling with now. They know they owe you honesty in return. They know that a relationship cannot be built on one person proving themselves while the other remains hidden. They know that if they truly want the future they have imagined with you, they must stop investigating your heart from a distance and begin revealing their own. Yet vulnerability terrifies them. To confess the test would mean admitting how deeply you affect them. It would mean acknowledging that they cared enough to search for answers. It would mean telling you that your loyalty mattered because losing you would hurt. For someone who has survived by acting unaffected, this confession feels enormous. They have learned to hide longing behind silence. They have disguised fear as independence. They have called distance peace, because admitting attachment felt too dangerous. But your honesty has removed their hiding place. They can no longer claim that you are untrustworthy. They can no longer blame confusion for their hesitation. They can no longer pretend the connection is shallow. Now they must face the truth, you have been real with them, and they have been afraid to be equally real with you. There was a moment after they cried when they reached for their phone. Their hand hovered over your name. They wanted to send a message. They wanted to type everything at once, the test, the discovery, the guilt, the relief, the feelings they had denied. They imagined your reaction. They wondered whether you would be angry. They feared you might feel insulted that they had doubted you. They feared you might walk away after realizing how deeply suspicion had shaped their behavior. They began writing. Then they erased it. They wrote again, using fewer words, hoping to sound calm. Then they erased that too. Finally, they stared at the empty message box, carrying a confession too large for a casual sentence. Do not mistake their silence for lack of emotion. Sometimes silence is where the loudest battles take place. Behind what appears to be distance, they are confronting memories they have avoided for years. Your honesty did not only answer a question about you. It reopened every moment when someone else had lied to them. It reminded them of promises that were broken, explanations that never came, and nights when they blamed themselves for trusting the wrong person. But this time, the memory did not end in pain. This time, the story presented someone who chose truth. That contrast overwhelmed them. They began remembering moments with you that they had previously misunderstood. A boundary you set was not rejection, it was self-respect. A pause in communication was not manipulation. It was your attempt to avoid speaking from anger. A difficult truth you shared was not meant to hurt them, it was proof that you valued honesty more than temporary harmony. Slowly, the events rearranged themselves in their mind, and your intentions became clearer. They realized you had been showing them who you were all along. The signs were never missing. Fear had simply translated them incorrectly. What they called inconsistency was caution. What they called distance was patience. What they called mystery was depth. What they called uncertainty was the slow unfolding of something sacred. And now another revelation is approaching, one they are not yet ready to speak aloud. Their secret test was connected to more than one question. They were not only trying to discover whether you were honest about your feelings. They were trying to discover whether you were still emotionally tied to something from your past. Someone had planted doubt in their mind. A voice near them had suggested that your heart was divided. This person may have spoken casually, pretending concern. They may have asked questions that seemed innocent. They may have hinted that your sincerity was an act or that your attention would eventually turn elsewhere. At first, your soulmate resisted the idea. But because fear was already present, the suggestion found a vulnerable place to grow. That is when the secret test became more deliberate. Your soulmate created a small situation to see how you would respond. They may have withdrawn attention, hoping to observe whether you immediately sought validation elsewhere. They may have mentioned a topic connected to your past. They may have delayed communication to see whether your story changed. They may even have asked someone to notice your reaction in a moment when you believed you were unobserved. They expected uncertainty. Instead, they saw consistency. You did not perform for them. You did not chase attention to provoke jealousy. You did not attempt to manipulate their emotions. Even when their behavior confused you, you stayed aligned with your character. You may have felt hurt, but you did not use that hurt as permission to become dishonest. That was the moment their plan turned against their fear. The test intended to expose you. Instead, it exposed the depth of their feelings. When they saw that you remained steady, the realization entered them with almost unbearable force: this person may truly care for me. For someone who has waited a long time to feel safe, that realization can be more frightening than rejection. Rejection confirms old expectations. Real love demands a new identity. It asks them to stop living as though abandonment is inevitable. It asks them to become visible. It asks them to receive what they once believed was unavailable to them. Your soulmate's tears were the beginning of that transformation. They cried for the version of themselves who had learned to expect betrayal. They cried for the years spent doubting their own judgment. They cried because you had offered honesty without knowing how desperately they needed it. They cried because they realized their heart had already chosen you before their mind finished resisting. But there is another reason their emotions became so intense. During the test, you said something. Perhaps a simple sentence, that reached deeper than you knew. You may not even remember saying it. It was not dramatic. It was not rehearsed. It came naturally from the truth of who you are. You expressed that real connection should not need games. You implied that trust must be given room to grow. You may have said that you would rather hear a painful truth than live inside a beautiful lie. When your soulmate later discovered the full truth about your actions, those words returned. They realized you had unknowingly described the very test they were placing before you. They felt exposed without being accused. Your integrity became a quiet correction. You did not shame them. You did not confront them. You did not know what they were doing. Yet your character revealed the difference between the love they feared and the love standing before them. That is why they broke down. The tears were repentance without words. Their soul was saying, "Should have trusted what I felt." My child, do not allow this revelation to fill you with pride or resentment. You are not being shown this so you can feel superior. You are being shown because your next response will matter. There may soon come a moment when this person approaches you differently. Their tone may soften. Their eyes may remain on you longer. They may ask a question that seems simple but carries the weight of everything they have discovered. Listen beneath their words. They may not confess all at once. Someone who has hidden for a long time rarely steps fully into the light in a single movement. They may begin with a partial truth. They may say they have been thinking about you. They may admit they misjudged a situation. They may apologize for seeming distant without immediately explaining the test. They may ask whether you still trust them, when the real question is whether they are worthy of your trust. Do not rush to complete the confession for them. Let them speak. Let them confront the courage required to become honest. You have already proven your heart through consistency. Now they must decide whether they are willing to meet you there. There is something else heaven wants you to understand. Their test was not entirely created by fear. Part of it was born from hope. Deep inside, beneath the suspicion, they wanted you to pass. They wanted every doubt to be proven wrong. They wanted to discover that your words were true. Even while looking for evidence against you, a hidden part of them was praying to find evidence for you. That is the contradiction they could not explain. They tried to protect themselves from disappointment while secretly longing to surrender. They wanted certainty but feared what certainty would require. They wanted proof of your love but knew that proof would force them to acknowledge their own. And when the proof arrived, they could no longer remain emotionally neutral. Their heart spoke before pride could stop it. The tears came because the answer was yes. Yes, you had been honest. Yes, your intentions were more sincere than they assumed. Yes, the connection had depth. Yes, they had fallen further than they admitted. And yes, they now risk losing you if they continue hiding. This last realization is the one that has kept them awake. They have started imagining what would happen if you finally grew tired of the uncertainty. They picture you withdrawing your energy, not from anger but from self-respect. They imagine someone else recognizing the honesty they questioned. They see the possibility of you building a life where your loyalty is received rather than investigated. That vision has shaken them. For the first time, they understand that your patience is not endless permission. Your kindness does not mean you will accept confusion forever. Your love may be deep, but it is not meant to live without truth. The thought of losing you has transformed their hesitation into urgency. Yet just as they were preparing to come forward, something unexpected happened. The person who originally planted doubt returned with new information. Your soulmate expected another warning, another suspicion, another reason to retreat. Instead, this person revealed a detail they had previously withheld. It was a detail about you, about the moment your honesty was tested, and about what you had quietly done afterward. When your soulmate heard it, they became completely still. The tears they had managed to control returned with even greater force. Because this new detail proved that you had not merely told the truth. You had sacrificed something to protect their heart. You had lost an opportunity, accepted a misunderstanding, or carried a burden in silence so that they would not be wounded by a situation they were not yet ready to face. You had done it without announcing yourself as a hero. You had done it without demanding gratitude. You had done it believing they might never know. And now they know. They know what your honesty cost you. They know how easily you could have defended yourself by revealing everything. They know that while they were testing your loyalty, you were quietly protecting their peace. That realization has created a decision they can no longer postpone. Tonight, or very soon, they will stand at the edge of a choice. One path allows them to remain hidden, preserve their pride, and risk losing the connection. The other requires them to reveal what they did, why they did it, who influenced them, and what they discovered about your sacrifice. They have already rehearsed the first sentence. But the confession does not begin with, "I tested you." It begins with words you never expected to hear from them. And once they speak those words, a secret connected to the person who planted the doubt will finally come into the light, a secret that may explain why your soulmate was encouraged to mistrust you from the very beginning.